Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 14th of November 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit, with just one topic today. Sorry, I still don't have a name for the one topic show, so I guess it's just content patch for the time being. So the news over the past few days has been almost exclusively focused on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, more specifically the PS4, because of course it will actually be out in a few days. As a direct result, we've been hearing a lot of stuff about the review practices as well as the launch games, with reviews for both Killzone and Knack, the two bigger games of the launch, coming out today, with unfortunately not a massive amount of praise for either. Killzone unfortunately does not seem to blow the bloody doors off anything, with a reasonable reception. Don't get me wrong, it's had good reviews, and many of them do in fact state that yes, this is a good looking game, it looks next gen, but unfortunately the gameplay doesn't seem to quite keep up with that. They're talking certainly about a graphical evolution there and a command of the hardware, but not in fact of any significant advancement in terms of actual gameplay. Killzone naturally has suffered from this problem pretty much since the first game, so that was to be expected. Knack, on the other hand, comes along with a fairly terrible set of reviews. Very few actual positive reviews, most of them saying that it is highly tedious, the combat isn't particularly enjoyable, and there's just not enough to do as you actually play through the game. This leaves the PS4 in a pretty precarious position, considering that multiple titles have been pushed back, including Watch Dogs, which, regardless of not being a PlayStation 4 exclusive, was heavily marketed by both Sony and Ubisoft as very much being the game that was played best on PS4 when it came to the next-gen machines. We've also lost Drive Club, which will not be coming until next year, and Infamous is still within the launch window, but is not expected to be coming out until early next year. Along with the recent announcements that the PlayStation 4 would not support a media server protocol, or indeed even MP3s, some of us who decided to pre-order our PlayStation 4s on the promise of a fantastic launch have unfortunately been left a little bit disappointed. So the purpose of this video is to discuss and compare the launch experience of these two platforms and talk about the early adoption, of course also from the perspective of somebody that owns a high-end PC. So, if you're picking up your PlayStation 4 on launch on the 15th of November in the US, what exactly will you get for it? What is worthwhile to play? Well, if you're coming from the perspective of someone that owns a good PC, then unfortunately you are a little bit out of luck. A lot of the titles that are available on the machine are also available on PC either already or on the same day. One of the strongest releases for the platform is in fact an indie game by some of the ex-Arcane developers by the name of Contrast, which is an exceptional, and I do mean exceptional, puzzle platformer which utilizes a very stylized mixture of burlesque and noir aesthetic, and also combines it with some very clever puzzle platforming using lighting and shadows within the environment. It also has a fantastic soundtrack and AAA quality visuals. This is a title that will actually be available for you if you are a PlayStation Network subscriber on launch for free, which is actually a very, very strong opener in my opinion, and it means that you won't have to necessarily buy it on PC, but regardless, it is going to be available on PC anyway. We should also, of course, mention Resogun, which is currently the highest rated exclusive for the machine, and is a side-scrolling shooter along the lines of Defender with a modern spin on it. This is from the developer of Super Stardust, who certainly know what they're doing when it comes to scrolling shooters. Both of these games will be available for free with the PlayStation Plus subscription. If you are a PC owner, you may also want to look into Flower, which is actually a cross-buy title. If you didn't own a PlayStation 3, then this is a good time to actually play Flower, which is from That Game Company, the guys that brought you Journey. Unfortunately, while there are plans to actually release a remastered version of Journey for the PlayStation 4, that has not materialized for launch by any stretch of the imagination. Aside from that, it would be pretty difficult to justify unless you happen to be using a fairly low-end machine machine, the purchase of titles like, say, Battlefield 4 or Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, even though Black Flag is not out on PC as of yet, and we have been waiting for the delayed version of it for God knows how long for no apparent reason, and that's expected to be released on November the 19th, about 4 days afterwards. So I guess if you're incredibly impatient, then you could pick up Black Flag on launch, or maybe just because you prefer to play it on a controller, which, frankly, I don't blame you. The controls for Assassin's Creed have never been amazingly good on PC, and honestly, Assassin's Creed 3 was not a great port. So there certainly are reasons to pick up that title on the PlayStation 4. Aside from that, though, looking at stuff like, say, Battlefield 4, you're better off with it on PC, and even though the PC version of Call of Duty Ghosts is currently an absolute bloody mess, unless you actually prefer to play with a pad, you're, again, probably better off with that game on PC. However, what if you don't own a PC? In which case, what the hell are you doing here? But what if you don't own a good PC and you're looking for the PlayStation 4 to actually be your primary entertainment system? Well, as it turns out, there are actually some options. There are reasons to own this thing. The first reason, of course, being the selection of free-to-play games that are available on launch, which include Blacklight Retribution, DC Universe Online, and Warframe. Out of those games, I would say that Warframe is actually the strongest of the three titles. PlanetSide 2 is coming to the machine, but it is not coming for a little while, so you unfortunately will not be able to play that. But I'd also like to give a little bit of a nod to DC Universe Online, actually, which is surprisingly good. There's been a lot of improvements made to that game since I last played it, and it is a pretty damn strong MMO title with a nice action spin on it. I enjoyed my time with it, and it's worth looking into, especially considering that at the highest end, DC Universe Online is quite demanding, as is Warframe, I might add. There's a lot of great particle effects and excellent use of physics within that can really strain your machine to the absolute limit. So I would say playing Warframe on a console is probably an enjoyable experience. I think that it could work out quite well for you. We should also, of course, make note that Need for Speed Rivals is coming to PlayStation 4 as, I wouldn't say a launch title per se, but it is going to be out on November the 19th. So basically, it's released on Tuesday of next week. So you wait a few days, you can get yourself Need for Speed Rivals if you're looking into that. And the next-gen version of NBA, that being NBA Live 14, is coming to Xbox One and PlayStation 4 on November the 19th. And you can also play a version of Madden NFL 25. If it happens to be something that you've missed there. Aside from that, though, the launch lineup is looking a little bit weak, and it's unfortunate that so many of these games have already been released on other platforms. I mean, if Warframe or Blacklight, things like that, were actually exclusives, then this would be a pretty strong lineup, but there are ways and means of playing these games already, which is a bit of a problem. If you compare that to the Xbox One's launch lineup, then things don't actually look all that rosy. The Xbox One has a number of exclusives which are quite interesting to me, including Dead Rising 3, which is probably going to end up being my highlight for that particular machine. Other titles also include Killer Instinct, which I'm looking forward to playing, and I should remind you, of course, that Killer Instinct comes with sort of a free demo. They're saying it was a generous demo or free-to-play or whatever. Basically, you can buy the game for $20, you can buy the future DLC, I think, for $40 in kind of an Ultimate Edition, or you can play one character for free and buy the characters $5 each as you go if you like. I approve of that business model. I think it's a very fair business model, and I'm hoping that more games actually adopt it, allowing you to buy just the whole game or buy it in bits if you're not that committed to it. Killer Instinct, for the most part, seems to have had a fairly positive reception when it's been showed, so that's a pretty strong title. There's also Rise, Son of Rome. Admittedly, all of the early previews for that have disregarded the title as not being particularly good. And there's Crimson Dragon. If you happen to be an old-school Panzer Dragoon fan, then Crimson Dragon will also be available as a launch title. It's a little bit niche for a lot of people, but that really is about it. Aside from that, you do have these same releases: Assassin's Creed 4, Call of Duty Ghosts, Battlefield 4, the sports games coming as well, Just Dance 2014, but they do have a racing game in the form of Forza Motorsport 5, that again being a launch title. I've got to say, I think that it is unfair to suggest that the Xbox One does not have a good launch lineup in comparison to the PlayStation 4, because it does. It has a good selection of stuff available there. It also, of course, has Lococycle from Twisted Pixel as a strong Xbox Live opener. Of course, I don't think that Lococycle on its own is enough to compete with the strong free-to-play lineup, as well as things like Contrast Resogun and the PlayStation 4 version of Flower, but it's nice that it's there nonetheless. Now, those are the launch titles. Of course, we're not going to be seeing Titanfall for a little while. That's going to be coming out next year. In fact, the Xbox One version of Minecraft didn't even make it. So, at this point, if you're just buying games and you're looking for some titles that will actually tide you over, bearing in mind that neither of these machines actually have backwards compatibility, then I'm afraid you've really got to be looking at the Xbox One, because I do not see all that many strong titles in the PlayStation 4's launch lineup. Again, this is especially true if you're a PC gamer and have already had access to those free-to-play titles before. However, what about the rest of the functionality? Well, it seems like we're not going to be getting Media Server, at least for a little while, on the PlayStation 4, and I think the elephant in the room that we really have to consider and talk about, which is strange to say, really, when it was mocked after the initial unveiling, is the Kinect and television integration. Now, the TV stuff is not going to be available in most regions to start with, and indeed, for a lot of us, the live TV integration is going to be a complete waste of our time, because this generation doesn't watch that much live TV anymore. We're more interested in stuff that's on demand. However, from the perspective of somebody that already owns a smart TV, but is kind of enduring the bit of clunk that is associated with the navigation and switching between applications on that, I'm actually kind of excited for the Xbox One, because it will make using things like Netflix and Amazon Instant Video and Hulu just that little bit easier. It will make it a little bit more convenient. Yeah, it's going in my living room, and I'm going to be sitting on my couch, and I can tell my Xbox where to go, and I don't have to fiddle around. And it might seem like a small thing, but I think that level of convenience means that I'll actually use the bloody thing. My concern about the PlayStation 4 is that outside of Killzone, I really don't have a reason to use it until Infamous or some other exciting PSN exclusive comes along to whisk me away. It will sit there gathering dust. The Xbox One on launch will get used because it actually has some utility outside of gaming. And I feel that in the long term, the PlayStation 4 will be the stronger platform because it focuses on power, because it focuses on gaming, and historically Sony has had the better exclusives, even though they seem to have tripped up with the launch window stuff. That said, though, the Xbox One as more of a living room box I find to be more useful in my daily life. I find it to be something that, even though I might not play the games on, will actually have some utility. And I've said it many times before, none of these consoles are going to beat the PC in terms of power. If I want a power game, I will do it on my PC, and I'll be happy to do it on my PC. But there are two things that will get me interested in consoles. That is good living room functionality and strong exclusives. And I'm sorry, but even though these games may run subpar, even though I can expect to play 720p, which is just nonsensical in this generation, Xbox One still has some games I want to play, like Dead Rising and like Killer Instinct. I'm hoping that the performance reports for Dead Rising 3 are merely based on pre-launch code, because frankly, if the recent reports on Digital Foundry are correct and that game is actually dropping down to about 20 frames per second at 720p, then that worries me an awful lot, not only for the performance of the thing, and as to whether or not I'll actually be able to enjoy it. I'm sorry, dropping down to that frame rate these days is simply unacceptable. I expect better. That does worry me greatly, but we will see. I'm hoping that they can tighten it up just a little bit there. My conclusion for the early adoption of both of these machines is usually the same as it is ever. Don't early adopt. Do not do it. The reason I do it, of course, well, it's my job. So I'm expected to have these consoles on day one so I can actually give you information about them. But if you are a consumer, I frankly believe that neither of these machines is actually worth your time on launch. But if I were to compare the two, and you are forced at gunpoint to buy one of them, I would say that from the start, the Xbox One is actually the stronger purchase, because it has a better launch lineup, in my honest opinion, and it has usefulness outside of the actual gaming functionality of it. The PS4's functions outside of gaming are threadbare at best. And up to this point, I've actually been fine with that, because I've said in the past, look, I have other ways of getting access to these non-gaming services. And Netflix on PS3 wasn't too bad, and I imagine that Netflix on PS4 will be pretty good too. But I cannot imagine that somehow that media functionality is going to be better on PS4 than it will on Xbox One. We have just gone at the Kinect over and over again and said, look at just how terrible this is for gaming, and I still believe that that is the case, but there are other functions, and I'm going to be honest, I know the whole spying thing is a factor, but I carry a cell phone around with me. That could be spying on me at any moment. In fact, it would probably do a much better job at it. So I am okay with that thing being in my living room. The functionality that it offers has value to me. It's something that will make my life a little bit easier, and it will also make my television watching experience more enjoyable, even though I don't actually have cable TV. It will make my Netflix and my Amazon and my Hulu experience just better in general. We shouldn't ignore, of course, the snap functionality, which will allow for some convenience where necessary. While I might not use it, I feel that the ability to have Skype actually running while you're gaming and snap to the side of the screen when relevant can be very useful. As it stands, it does seem like the Xbox One was not fully aimed at the sole notion of gaming. That's gonna kill it in the long run. Certainly from my perspective. If games aren't running at 720p 60 FPS now, then God knows what they'll be struggling to do in the so-called 10-year lifespan of this damn machine. And I fully believe that maybe a year down the line, my PlayStation 4 will be getting use as an actual gaming machine, whereas my Xbox One will be little more than a Netflix box. But for early adoption, the Xbox One has to win out. I don't think there's a real question about that. There you go, folks, my opinion on the launch, and of course, I'll give you a little bit more information once I've got my hands on the bloody thing. The PlayStation 4 comes out this Friday in America on the 15th of November, with the Xbox One coming next week on the 22nd. Alright, folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Content Patch, and I will see you next time.